I was standing at gate 14 with my coat draped over one arm, and the family veil pressed tight in the other hand when the message came through. 5 words. Cold. Final. Actually, it's just her family. No hello, no apology, not even mom. Just that. Like I was an item scratched off a grocery list. Around me the terminal buzzed with life, someone nearby laughing into her phone, a suitcase thumping against a leg, a child begging for candy. The world moved forward, but I stayed frozen. I stared at that little glowing screen, willing it to change, praying it was some kind of mistake. But the typing bubble never came back. I didn't cry. I wanted to. My chest felt heavy, full of water and broken glass, each breath cutting from the inside. But I didn't let a single tear fall. Instead, I eased myself down onto a hard metal bench, smoothing my skirt like I was waiting for an appointment, like dignity hadn't just boarded a plane and left without me. No one had offered to pay for my trip. I'd bought my own ticket, happy to be included. Glad, really. I'd picked out a new dress. Nothing fancy, just a dark blue one with pearl buttons that looked neat and proper. I'd brought the veil, too. My mother wore it in 1947. I wore it in 1972. I'd had it cleaned and wrapped carefully in tissue paper, tied with a little ribbon, thinking his bride might like the charm of it. Along with it I carried gifts. A check folded neatly in an envelope and a locket engraved with their initials. Now all of it sat in my floral suitcase beside me, handle frayed from years of use, like some exhibit of wasted effort. My son Daniel knew I was coming. He knew about the flight, the hotel, the veil. He let me arrive, let me stand right there where I'd come only for him, and then erased me with a single text. I opened the message again, scanning the white space like maybe tone was hiding there, but it wasn't. Said exactly what it said. I pulled my coat on, lifted my chin straighter than I felt. Maybe someone was watching. Maybe fate itself. Either way, I wasn't going to let it see me break. The taxi line was short. The driver was a young guy with tattoos creeping out from under his sleeves. He hardly looked at me when I gave him the name of the hotel I'd chosen. A clean, quiet place I'd found online. He asked if I was in town for the wedding. I gave a tight smile. Not anymore, I told him. We rode in silence after that. The city rolled by outside, palm trees swaying under 2 perfect skies. California sunshine. Too bright, too beautiful for the hollow ache inside me. Minnesota felt like a different planet. At the hotel I checked in, tipped the bellboy, though I almost never do, and stood in the room without moving. The view overlooked a parking lot, a strip mall with a pharmacy and a frozen yogurt shop. Not the dream I'd imagined. I unpacked the veil first, setting it on the bed as if it were a fragile sleeping child. Then the locket. Then the card. I lined them up on the desk like evidence in a case no one would ever try. He hadn't always been this way. That's the part that burned. He used to cling to my leg on the first day of kindergarten. He used to draw me pictures of houses with hearts floating above the roof. He'd sit at the kitchen table asking how the sun worked while I peeled apples for pie. I don't know what I thought. That weddings were about family. That mothers mattered. That staying up with him through fevers and chickenpox meant something even now. That maybe he'd want me there, standing behind him quietly with love. But instead, he deleted me with 5 words. And still I didn't cry. I sat there while the sky faded, neon lights buzzing on across the street. Then I stood, walked to the desk and picked up the hotel notepad. My hand shook only a little as I wrote 2 things. Cancel the transfer to Daniel. Call Carol. Carol's my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to say. If I didn't have a place at my son's table, then I sure wasn't going to keep paying for the feast. I folded the veil back into its box one last time. Slipped the locket inside. Sealed the envelope. Not with tears. With resolve. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something older. Worn carpets maybe, or air that had sat too long. I stood at the little window, curtain cord in hand, watching the sky turn from gold to gray. My suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed. Not because I'd forgotten it, but because I wasn't ready to admit I was here alone without a reason. I had come for my son's wedding. I had packed carefully, extra stockings, my pill organizer, even a nail file in a zip bag so security wouldn't fuss. That kind of preparation doesn't just vanish because your invitation does. Finally, I opened the suitcase. Laid out my shoes on the floor, hung up the new dress, lined my toiletries in the bathroom. And then I reached for the small wooden box, wrapped in a handkerchief, nestled deep among the clothes. The veil. My mother, Louise, had worn it at her wedding. Handmade lace as delicate as breath. She'd passed it down and I'd worn it at mine. I'd spent more on its preservation than on my own gown. I'd imagined placing it gently in my daughter-in-law's hands, telling her it came from women who worked hard, who stayed, who loved stubbornly. I pictured her smile. Instead, I ran my fingers over the fragile netting and thought, too fine for this world. Too fine for people who erase mothers with 5 words. I set it back in the box. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. The bed was too hard, the sheets too white. I lay on my side watching the shadows move across the ceiling. The TV stayed silent. I waited for another message, some correction, some excuse, but the phone on the nightstand stayed dark. By morning my decision was made. I called the front desk and asked for a local law office. The man rattled off 3 numbers, his voice cheerful like he was trained to be. I chose the second one because it sounded like the kind of place that wouldn't hang up on an old woman. They said they could see me that afternoon. I confirmed, dressed carefully, packed the veil back into its box, and left it on the desk with a note, "Do not disturb. I'll be back." But I slid the envelope with the gift into my purse. That decision wasn't finished yet. The law office was in a beige building beside a dry cleaner. Nothing fancy. But the woman who greeted me had silver hair and eyes that looked right through pretense. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked. "I'm Anne. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I need to update my will," I said. "And I want to set up a trust." And nodded without asking why, just led me to her office and poured me a glass of water. I liked her immediately. "I want my son Daniel Miller removed completely," I told her. "Every last bit. Everything should go to my granddaughter." Her eyebrow ticked up. "May I ask why?" "Because she's the only one who's never lied to me. And because I won't leave my life's work to a man who deletes his mother like junk mail." And didn't gasp or cluck sympathy. She just made neat notes. "Does your granddaughter have a guardian?" "She's 18. First year of college. Smart as they come." "Then it's simple. A will and a living trust." "Any terms you'd like to set?" "Yes," I said. "No full access until she turns 25. Unless it's for education, healthcare, or her first home." And smiled faintly. "That's not punishment. That's protection. You're not ruining her. You're restoring balance." 2 hours later I left with a folder of papers and her card. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. Like I'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to do right by me. Back in the hotel room. The sun was setting on another postcard-perfect California sky. I sat in the same chair by the window, but something had shifted. The veil stayed on the desk untouched. Instead, I picked up my phone and texted my granddaughter. "Clara, are you free for lunch tomorrow?" She answered in 2 minutes. "Of course, Grandma. Where should I meet you?" And just like that, I realized I hadn't been uninvited from everything. Just from one wedding. I told him, "You'll be okay, right?" And he said he believed me. I said yes. He left me the house, the Buick, and a bank account that, if I watched it carefully, would carry me for a while. What he also left was a long, echoing silence. At first that silence didn't register. I kept busy with school. I was still teaching 3rd grade then. And the kids filled the hours with juice boxes, shoelaces, and sticky palms. The noise was a shield. Children don't give you room to think too much. But nighttime pulled down around me and was quieter than anything I'd known before. No voice from the next room asking where the batteries were. No slippers scuffing along the kitchen tiles. Just the house settling and my own breath. In the first year, Daniel called every Sunday like clockwork at 5. We talked about the weather, my health, books he was reading. Then those calls thinned out every other Sunday, then monthly, then only when he needed something. Excuses came easy: work, travel, the baby. His wife preferred structure, he said. She likes space. I gave him the space that turned into an ocean between us. He never said it straight, but you could feel it in how he introduced me. "This is my mother," followed by a pause, a careful change in tone. I wasn't polished enough. My hands had telltale lines. My laugh was too loud. I started sending gift cards at Christmas to match the tone he wanted. It didn't bring calls with it. People describe widowhood like a sudden blow to the chest, But for me it was a slow dust settling. After the casseroles stopped and the neighbors stopped dropping by, after Daniel stopped saying love you, at the end of our chats the quiet took root. I never remarried. George was the kind of man who comes once. Not flashy but steady. He used to say, some men try to be heroes. I'll settle for coming home. He did, right up until the end. There were nights, particularly in that second year, when I'd wake and talk to him aloud into the dark, little updates. What Daniel said, what Clara drew, how the furnace sounded. Silly maybe, but it helped. I can imagine George would have been furious, not at Daniel exactly, but at how easily a son can forget the one who taught him to tie his shoes, who cleaned his fevered forehead at midnight, who ran after him when his bike tipped over. George would have said, Mary, don't let him treat you like this. I used to answer back to the empty room, it's just the way he is now. But sitting in that hotel with the boxed veil, the new wool done, and Clara sipping iced tea with her knees tucked up like a child, I wonder if George might have been right. Maybe I let it slide too long. Maybe I made too many excuses. Not anymore. Back home there's a drawer that sticks on the left. You tug and it flies open with a clatter. That drawer keeps everything I thought I'd never need again. Receipts, bank letters, warranties, and a folder labeled Daniel. I started that folder when he married, just trying to stay organized so I wouldn't forget what I'd promised or paid. Over time it turned into a ledger. A quiet accounting of what it costs to keep someone in your life when love isn't enough alone. The first paper is from 2003. A $12,000 check for a down payment on their first apartment. He told me it was temporary, a stepping stone. A year later they moved into a condo his in-laws helped finance. No one ever mentioned my part. Then a credit card payoff, $6,800. He'd lost a job and bills piled up. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, reading his email twice before calling the bank. I told him not to worry. Mothers don't let their children sink if they can help it. Then came the baby, my bright little Clara. When she was born I offered to start a college fund. Daniel said it wasn't necessary. They'd take care of it. They didn't. The folder holds receipts. Diapers, a stroller. A hospital bill that should have been covered. I sent money quietly, no questions. In 2011 he tore a ligament. The deductible was high. $2,300, I wired it the same day. In 2015 their car died. Not the nicer one his wife drove but the older runabout. I paid the repairs. Another year the roof leaked on a cold night. He called in a whisper, and I sent $8,000 that morning. Over 20 years the folder documents $57,000 I sent. Not counting flights, gifts, groceries I left on their doorstep, coats I bought for Clara every winter, the laptop I mailed when hers broke. It isn't about the money really. At first each dollar felt like a distant hug. But gradually the calls came only when something was needed and the warmth dried up. Donations and gifts were taken for granted. Deposits went unnoticed. Last birthday I sent a check. It was cash the next day, no call. The last sheet in the folder is from 4 months ago. A transfer of $3,000 for wedding incidentals, florals, deposits, whatever she needed, he'd said. I sent it that afternoon. I was thrilled to be included, delighted to think I mattered. Funny how much I spent to be disinvited. I reviewed the papers before leaving. Black and white evidence that the distance wasn't imagined, that neglect had a balance. They say love shouldn't keep score. Maybe. Dignity keeps a ledger. That first hotel night was the longest I'd had in years. Longer than when George died. Longer than the night Clara was born when no one thought to call. The AC buzzed, the TV cast a ghost of light on the ceiling even though I hadn't turned it on. The dress hung untouched in the closet. Navy, modest, a little lace at the collar, the kind of thing my mother would have worn. It was meant to be the dress I'd watched my son marry in. Now it looked like something abandoned at a thrift store. The veil stayed boxed beside the bed. It deserved more than zippers and nylon. It had survived generations and I had brought it here with hope. I made myself tea from the tiny coffee maker. Cardboard water, really, and watched cars roll through the parking lot. Out somewhere, perhaps only a few miles away, my son was laughing, finishing his rehearsal dinner surrounded by cocktail dresses and linen shirts, wine paid for by someone else. Did he think of me at all? Had it hurt him? That was the cruelest thought. Maybe it hadn't even bothered him. The 5-word message sat on my phone, permanent and unread. I opened a blank note and started, "Dear Daniel," then stopped. What could I put that I hadn't tried to show? I raised him. I loved him. I never asked for much. And still he pulled away. So I scrolled through old photos instead. Him in kindergarten with a missing tooth. Him at 12 saluting in a scout uniform. Him holding newborn Clara with fear and pride on his face. The pictures thinned out over time. The spaces between snapshots grew longer. I expected tears, but none came. It wasn't sorrow exactly. It was a heavier, quieter realization that this wasn't a single cruelty but the final proof of a slow leaving. Around midnight as I sat in that armchair, a small thought nudged me. Maybe this is a blessing. If I hadn't come, I might have spent another year pretending everything was fine, continuing the habit of sending money and waiting for calls that never came. Perhaps this sharp moment was the clarity I needed. Something inside me whispered the words George might have said. "Mary, you have a life too." The idea startled me. I poured the cold tea down the sink, washed the mug, folded the extra blanket at the foot of the bed, brushed my teeth, smoothed the comforter the way I used to, and crawled into bed alone. Not forgotten, remembered. I belonged to myself, and if no one else would honor that, I would. Clara rang the next morning. I was by the window with coffee, trying to muster an appetite for the complimentary breakfast I knew I wouldn't touch. Seeing her name softened something. "Grandma," she said, voice tight. "I just heard. Dad didn't invite you." I closed my eyes for a moment. "No, sweetheart. He didn't." There was silence, but not the empty kind. This one filled with disbelief and anger. I recognized it. I'd lived there. "I don't understand," she said. "He said it would be small, family only. I figured you were flying in early. I thought you were part of it." I told her I was, in my mind. "Why didn't you say anything at lunch yesterday?" She asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" I took a breath. "I didn't want our time together to become about him," I said. "I wanted to see you. Just you." She sounded restless the way she always had. Even as a child she paced when something felt wrong. "He never mentioned it," she said. "How could he?" I answered quietly, because it was easier for him to lie than to look me in the face. Because he didn't think anyone would ask. "Well, he was wrong," she said. "I'm going to ask him now." I cut in gently. "No, Clara." I could feel her starting to move. "This isn't your fight. It's mine. I've already decided how to handle it." She became quiet, but this time it was full of listening. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I told her I'd already done it. "The veil stays with me. The gift will go to someone who deserves it. My money, my name, my legacy. They won't go where I'm not welcome." "You rewrote your will?" she asked, soft now. "Yes. It's yours," I said. "Not because you asked, not because of blood, but because you've never made me feel like a burden." I heard her breathing. "Grandma," she whispered. "That's too much. I don't need." "I know you don't," I said. "That's exactly why." He asked me if I'd be okay, and I told him yes. He believed me. Then he left me with the house, the Buick, and just enough in the bank to last if I was careful. What he really left me with, though, was silence, a long, heavy one. First, I didn't notice. My days were still filled with third graders and their shoelaces, juice boxes, and sticky hands. Kids leave no room for thinking, and the noise kept me company. But when night came, the quiet pressed in. No voice calling out from the other room about where the batteries were. No shuffle of slippers across the kitchen floor. Just the creak of the house and my own breath. That first year, my son James called every Sunday at 5 on the dot. We'd chat about the weather, what he was reading, how I was doing. Then it turned into every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then only when he needed something. He always had reasons: work, travel, the baby. His wife didn't like phone calls, he said. She liked structure, liked her space. So I gave him enough space to lose me completely. He never said it out loud, but I could feel it when he introduced me to new people. "This is my mom." Followed by that pause, that little shift in tone. I wasn't polished enough. My hands were rough. My laugh too loud. I started sending gift cards for Christmas just to make things easier, to fit in. He never complained, but he never called either. People say widowhood hits like a punch to the chest, but for me it was a slow settling. After the casseroles stopped, after the neighbors quit dropping by, after James stopped ending calls with "love you," it drifted in like dust. I never remarried. Never wanted to. George was the kind of man you only get once. Not flashy but steady. He used to tell me, "Some men try to be heroes. I'll settle for coming home." And he always did until he didn't. In those early years I still spoke to him in the dark. Whispered to the empty room about what James had said, what Clara had drawn, how the furnace had started making that new rattle. Silly maybe, but it steadied me. I think George would have been angry, not at James exactly, but at how quickly a son can forget who taught him to tie his shoes, who cleaned his sheets when he was sick, who ran alongside his bike the first time the training wheels came off. I could almost hear George saying, "Mary, don't let him treat you like this." And I'd answer out loud, "It's just how he is now." But now? Sitting in that hotel room with the boxed veil, a rewritten will, and Clara curled up with iced tea like a girl half her age, I wondered if George had been right all along. Maybe I let it slide too long. Back home there's a drawer in my kitchen that sticks on the left side. Tug it right and it flies open with a clatter. That drawer holds everything I thought I'd never look at again. Receipts, letters from the bank, old warranties, and one folder marked James. I started it when he got married just to keep track of what I gave, what I promised. But over the years it turned into something else. A quiet record of what it costs to stay in someone's life when love isn't enough. The first paper dates back to 2003, a $12,000 check for their first apartment down payment. He said it was just until they got on their feet. A year later, they moved into a condo his in-laws helped finance. My part wasn't mentioned. Next came a credit card balance, $6,800, after he lost his job. I remember reading his email twice before I called the bank. I told him not to worry. That's what mothers do. Then Clara was born, my bright light. I offered to set up a college fund, but he waved me off, said they'd handle it. They never did. Instead, the folder filled up with receipts for diapers, strollers, even a hospital bill that somehow slipped through insurance. In 2011, it was a torn ligament and a deductible too high, $2,300 wired the same day. In 2015, their old car broke down. $120. A year later, their roof leaked, and he called me in a whisper like he didn't want his wife hearing. "Mom, I hate to ask." But he didn't hate it. $8,000 gone before breakfast. Over 20 years, that folder recorded $57,000. Not counting gifts, flights, groceries, winter coats for Clara. Laptops mailed when hers broke. It wasn't the money. If he'd said thank you, if he'd called just to talk, it would have balanced. But somewhere along the way it shifted. It stopped being help and became expectation. A quiet tax on motherhood. The first 5 years, every dollar I sent felt like a hug from afar. Later, it became withdrawals without warmth. No thanks, no calls, just silence. Last year I sent him a check for his birthday. He cashed it the next day. Never picked up the phone. The last paper in that folder? A $3,000 transfer 4 months before the wedding, for florals, deposits, whatever she needs. I sent it happily, thrilled to be included. Thrilled to be invited. Imagine paying to be disinvited. I went through those papers before my trip, to remind myself I wasn't imagining the distance. It wasn't just in my head. It was ink on paper. People say love doesn't keep score. Maybe it shouldn't, but dignity does. That first night at the hotel dragged longer than the night George died. Longer than the night Clara was born and no one called me. The air conditioner hummed, shadows flickered on the wall from a TV I never turned on. Silence felt truer. I unpacked my bag anyway. The navy dress with lace at the collar hung untouched in the closet. I'd chosen it because it reminded me of my mother. It was supposed to be the dress I wore to watch my son say vows. Now it just looked abandoned. The veil, too precious for zippers, stayed boxed by the bed. I brewed myself tea with the tiny coffee maker. It tasted like cardboard and regret. I sat by the window, cup in hand, watching cars slip in and out of the lot. Somewhere out there, just miles away, my son was laughing at his rehearsal dinner. Clinking glasses, making toasts. I wondered if he even noticed I wasn't there. That was the cruelest part. Not the exclusion itself, but the thought that it hadn't even cost him anything. I checked my phone. No message, no call. Just those 5 words. Actually, it's just her family. Still there. Still permanent. I opened a blank note, typed "Dear James," then stopped. What was left to say? Instead, I scrolled through old pictures. Kindergarten, tooth missing. 12 years old in his scout uniform, holding Clara for the first time, pride and fear written across his face. Then the photos thinned out. Longer gaps. Fewer smiles meant for me. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but no. What I felt was heavier than sorrow. It was the realization that this wasn't sudden cruelty. It was just the last page in a book that had been closing for years. And strangely, around midnight I felt something shift. Not anger. Not bravery. Just clarity. Maybe this was a blessing. Maybe if I hadn't come, I'd have kept pretending another year, sending checks, waiting for calls. But this sharp cut had given me something George would have said if he were still here. "Mary, you've got a life too." That thought startled me. But it was clear calm. I poured the cold tea down the sink, folded the blanket, smoothed the comforter like I used to at home, and climbed into bed. Not because I was forgotten, but because I remembered I belonged to myself. The next morning Clara called. Her voice was tight. "Grandma, I just found out. Dad didn't invite you." "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "He didn't." Silence, but not the hollow kind. The kind that crackles with disbelief. "I don't understand. He told me it was just family. I assumed you were already here." "I was in my mind," I said. "Why didn't you tell me yesterday at lunch?" "Because I didn't want our time together to be about him. I wanted it to be about you." I could hear her pacing. She'd always been that way. He never even mentioned it. Not once. How could he? "Because it was easier to lie than to look me in the eye," I answered. "Well, he was wrong. I'm going to ask him right now." "No, Clara." She stopped. I could feel her listening. "This isn't yours to fix. It's mine. And I've already decided how to handle it." Quiet again, but this time with understanding. "What are you going to do?" "I've already done it," I said. "The veil stays with me. The gift goes to someone who deserves it. And my money, my name, my legacy, they won't go where I'm not welcome." "You rewrote your will." "Yes. And the trust." Her voice turned soft. "It's mine now." "Yes. Not because you asked, not even because you're blood, but because you've never treated me like a burden." She was quiet a long time before whispering, "I'll make you proud." "You already do." Someone knocked in the background. Her father, I guessed. She had to go. But before she hung up, she said, firm and clear, "I want to stay close. I want to know you. Really know you." And that was the gift I hadn't dared to hope for. Clara had mentioned the location once without realizing what she'd given away. So that morning I didn't put on the navy dress I'd packed for the wedding. Instead, I chose a soft gray blouse with slacks, simple, clean, comfortable. Clothes meant for sitting in a garden, not for being photographed. I called a taxi and rode out to the estate. It was the kind of place built for magazines. Stone walkways, trimmed hedges, pale roses that bloomed too perfect to be real. The gates stood wide open. Guests drifted in, light fabrics and pastel colors, laughter rising like the music already warming up inside. I didn't follow them. Across the street, beneath the shade of an old jacaranda tree, there was a bench. That's where I sat, veil tucked in my bag, hands folded in my lap. Not hiding. Just watching. A man parked a golf cart by the entrance. Two women in matching silk dresses fussed with each other's hair. A young couple posed for selfies in front of the arch wrapped in ivy. The sound of strings floated faintly through the air. Soft, pleasant, distant. Each person walked by, oblivious to the woman across the street who had quietly covered the cost of more than a few of their champagne flutes. Then I saw James. He stepped out of a black car, polished and tall, laughing with the best man. His tuxedo fit like it had been stitched to his bones. His hair was combed just the way I used to do it when he was 5, part to the side, smoothed down with water. But he never turned toward the street. Not once. He walked as if the world behind him had never existed. And I wasn't angry. I thought I might be, that seeing him in this final act of erasure would split something inside me. But what I felt was distance, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. A woman in a pearl pink gown slipped her arm through his. The bride, I guessed. She smiled, radiant and practiced, and they walked together toward the arch while the guests stood. I stayed on my bench. Still. Whole. The ceremony lasted exactly 22 minutes. I know because I counted. Birds fluttered through branches overhead. A dog barked somewhere far off. Someone spilled a drink on their shoes. Then the applause rose loud and cheerful. People streamed down the walk again, cameras flashing, music swelling. James posed with his in-laws, with friends, with the officiant. Not with me. Never with me again. I stood slowly, smoothing the front of my shirt, brushing jacaranda petals from my lap. I didn't feel bitter. I felt unhooked, untethered. There's a strange kind of power in watching the moment you were cut out of, and realizing you survived it. I turned from the estate and walked back toward the city. Past shops. Past the cafe where Clara and I had met. Past strangers who caught my eye and smiled like I belonged. And I did. Because family isn't always who saves you a seat at the wedding. Sometimes it's who meets you the next morning for breakfast, just to ask how you slept. Clara did that. She showed up the next morning, no makeup, her hair in a loose bun, face marked with a tiredness that wasn't from lack of sleep. But when she saw me, she smiled. Not politely, not with guilt, but with relief. Recognition. We sat outside at a cafe near the park, the same one we'd met at before, though we didn't mention it. She ordered tea. I asked for strong coffee. For a while we just let the morning hum around us. Dishes clinking, bikes rolling past, a dog barking at pigeons. Then I asked gently, "How was it?" She blinked. Strange. How so? It all looked beautiful. Perfect even. But it felt thin. I nodded, waited. "No one mentioned you," she said finally. "Not once. I kept expecting it. For someone to say, 'Too bad Mary couldn't be here.' Or even ask where you were. But nothing." "That doesn't surprise me," I said quietly. She bit her lip. I wanted to say something. During the toast I almost did. But I didn't want to make it about me. Or about you. "You did the right thing," I told her. "No," she shook her head. "I did the easy thing." I looked at her closely. Her eyes were rimmed red but steady. That Whitney steadiness. It had skipped her father, but it lived in her. "You're not responsible for my pain, Clara." "I know," she said softly. But I still felt it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside was the locket. She laid it on the table between us, not pushing it toward me, just setting it there. "I brought it yesterday. Kept it in my pocket the whole time." "That's not really a pocket piece," I said. "I know." She gave a small smile. But it felt right. Like I was carrying you with me. I touched the locket gently, then pushed it back to her. "It's yours. Not just to keep in a box, yours to wear, to carry forward." She looked down at her tea. "I think Dad knows I'm upset. He tried joking with me last night, but I barely answered." "You don't have to choose," I said. But she shook her head. "I already have. Not sides. Just truth. I know who's honest with me. I know who sees me." Something shifted in me then. Not triumph, not victory. Healing. Like a swollen door finally creaking open. "I wish I could promise it won't get harder," I said. "But it might. The older you get, the more people will ask you to pretend things are fine when they're not." "You're the only one who's ever said that out loud," she whispered. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't owe anyone silence." She squeezed back. "Neither do you." We sat there until the sun pressed warm on our shoulders, until the tea turned cold, until the waitress passed by and smiled. "You two look alike," she said. And for the first time in years I believed it was a compliment. Because I wasn't just a forgotten mother anymore. I was Clara's grandmother. And that was enough.